2 coats of rust bullet on the undercarriage and on the floor pan, and after that we're gonna follow up by 2 coats of epoxy primer. First coat of rust bullet is done. It went pretty well. Now I'm going to use this undercoating gun with this flexible tip. What I'm going to do is put it inside the frame holes. I'm going to spray the inside of the frame rails, which is something that most people do not do, but I don't want to have any rust down the road. And why rust bullet? Well, because there are some areas that I can't reach, and this paint will encapsulate any remaining rust on whatever the part is, and it can be top coated with epoxy primer, which is the next step. And epoxy primer will probably be enough, but better overkill than underkill. Coats are done, and as you can see, it was pretty messy painting the inside of the frames with the flexible extension. What I noticed was that while I was at that stage, the paint was already starting to harden inside the cup and inside my gallon here. What happened is I didn't seal it properly. I thought the humidity wasn't high enough to cause that issue, but apparently it did. So the paint was already starting to become a really blobby mess. So I added some Xylem, which is the appropriate thinner for that product, and I could spray the rest of the second coat, but really didn't spray as well as the first coat, but it still got the job done. So now I'm just going to sand real fast the quarter panel and the top so I can start spraying the epoxy primer. I'm using my trusted woodworking sander, which is a Mirka Deros electrical sander, variable speed. It's a 6-inch, and there's this mesh type. It's called Abranet Ace HD. Pretty good stuff. Not aggressive enough. That's when you get the big boy.
It seemed no matter how many times I would spin the car on the rotisserie, hoping to get rid of all the sand inside the frame rails and all the nooks and crannies after that sandblasting operation, there's still some more coming out. But that's not really an issue, since this will be top coated with a Raptor bed liner in a future video. So basically you won't see any of it, and it will be covered in the bed liner. Been fine only using epoxy primer and not spraying rust bullet, but the more the better.
For those of you wondering type of sander this is a Bosch 6-inch GET75. It's a dual mode sander. It has a turbo geared mode, so it's basically a grinder. It's those who are familiar, it's pretty similar to a Festool Rotex. It's arguably even, some might say, better. I know it's half the price, so for what I paid, it's an incredible tool. It's an incredible sander. Its job is really to remove things. It removes stuff as fast as a belt sander, but it's way more accurate. It's way easier to handle, and I love it. Right, sanding is done. So now I'm going to use this metal prep, which is basically a rust remover, just to remove any surface rust that has developed since yesterday. Now I'm going to let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes. That's going to give me just enough time to mix my epoxy primer first batch. Oh, and then you have to rinse it off with water, which I don't like, but it's an acid, so it needs to be neutralized.
For epoxy primer, I used a brand called Evotech, which is available locally. I used a cheap HVLP on a 9.5 rated CFM compressor, and I took more time than needed, but it went fine.